but it also is a possibility that Presidential Chief Advisor Ibrahim Kalın may be or is a very strong contender for the role of foreign minister. And as we know, yes, things in Turkey tend to be controlled by the president himself most of the time. But in terms of foreign policy, we had very different applications due to the works of former foreign policy advisors or ministers. And so Turkey may experience some changes in its foreign policy objectives in the new era. Secondly, we have obviously the Russian operations in Ukraine at the moment, which is a very important issue in Turkish foreign policy, because Turkey keeps some sort of middle ground between the two powers. But at the end of the day, it may or may not end up keeping in this role, and as a result may end up having to choose sides in the conflict rather than continuing with its middle of the ground policy. And I think in such a need for choosing sides, Turkey will side with or will go nearer to Russian Federation than Ukraine, and it might complicate its relations with Ukraine or the Western alliance in the middle run. Also, Turkey is involved in many different current military operations, or has a military presence abroad in Syria, in Libya, and in supporting UN operations and so forth. So we can say that the involvement seems to be continuing in the new government era as well. But obviously, to do that, you have to have the right finances. You have to have strong financial support for military operations abroad. And at the moment, Turkey is not as powerful in terms of finances as it used to be a few years back. So we may see some changes in Turkish operations in Syria and in Libya and other involvements involving UN and NATO. Now, speaking of Syria, of course, the relationships between Turkey and Northern Iraq Kurdish Authority is important in terms of economics, because they export quite a bit of petroleum to Turkey. And the problem there is that there is a rift now between the central Iraqi government and northern Iraqi government. And as a result of that, that might create some slight damage to Turkish economy, because the central government now says that Iraqi Kurdish Authority is just exporting petroleum as it wants to Turkey without giving any revenues to the central government's budget, and then they become richer than they should be. And as a result, the problem's solution lies with some Turkish involvement in the issue, and we have to follow this, because if the situation continues and deteriorates again, it will be to have negative impacts on Turkish economy. Now, another thing, when we look at the Western front, Western relations of Turkey, European Union is a problem for Turkey. Recently, the visa approval rate for Schengen zone has dropped to 1/5 of visa approval rate from the sanctioned Russian Federation citizens. So Turkey may find a way to restore relations with the EU members, and I think France is a good candidate for this, with President Macron losing more and more popularity and support in his country, and also because they have important stakes in Eastern Mediterranean in terms of petroleum and natural gas exploration. And if Turkey may establish a mostly economic relationship with France based on mutual benefits, then it might help Turkish relations with EU. The same is true with Italy, with their government's views somewhat overlapping in terms of foreign policy with the Turkish attitude, and also with Hungary, with which we have very important ties. And maybe we should, from now on, Turkey should focus more on the financial and trade sides of relationships with the European Union countries. NATO, just next to European Union, is a problem itself, because the view about NATO is changing, and Turkey's role in NATO is again important for other reasons than being the country next to Syria, Iran, and Iraq. But the thing is, a few years back, when you ask to the majority of Turkish academics and Turkish bureaucrats, especially foreign ministry bureaucrats, they would say that NATO membership is a burden on Turkey. With the Russian operations in Ukraine, the view changed, and everyone said, well, it's good that we are in NATO. And now with the Finnish and Swedish membership applications, we have a problem there for Turkey to solve, and Sweden's membership is on hold due to Turkey's sensitivities on the PKK issue, and also the Western allies of Turkey are pressurizing to let Sweden into NATO, and Turkey may see how things continue developing with NATO. Now, continuing from there, obviously the relationship with United States is interesting at the moment, because on the one hand, we appear to be very close allies, and on the other, we have lots of issues in which we upset each other. So now Turkish side is more stable at the moment, because we have 5 more years of AK Party government and Erdogan's presidency. But on the other hand, in the American side, Biden is facing re-election, and he has problems. He has approval problems. He has lots of contenders, and so on and forth. So Turkey may have the upper hand for the first time in years against United States in this area. Now, Russian Federation and Turkey, when we look at it, we have great bonds beyond what the Ukraine campaign might bring or distract from the relationship. The Akkuyu nuclear power station, touristic, commercial, financial bonds are very strong between the two countries. And on the one hand, our Western allies are telling us that it's very good that Turkey is establishing good relations with the Russian side, but on the other hand, they are saying you are having way too much good relations with them. So we have to satisfy all three fronts: Turkish front, Russian front, and Western front in these relations. And to do that, I think Turkey has to point its focus towards some new cooperations with Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with African Union, with Mercosur, with ASEAN, and possibly most importantly, and I think as a major novelty for Turkish foreign policy, with India, which is a rising power, and the G20 summit will be in India. And if we can establish good relations with India, we can improve our relationships in the subcontinent and in the Pacific Indian Ocean region, in the Pacific Rim, Indian Ocean Rim area. And this relationship might help us quite a bit in the future, because, as you know, very, very recently, in the last few days, there are tensions rising between Iran and Afghanistan because they have skirmishes in the border, and this will come as a big problem in Turkish foreign policy, because there are two countries we have to have a balanced relationship with, and if there is a fight between them, and there are hundreds of thousands of Afghanis living in Iran, so that might affect Turkey's relations with Iran and Turkey's relations with Afghanistan, and it will complicate the issues in Syria, in the Balkans, in the Caucasus region, or maybe, if we can say it, in the Black Sea Basin, and that would be quite a challenge for Turkey in the coming months, I think. Thank you kindly for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Professor Karadeli. Now, without any losing time, we continue to Mr. Sotnichenko. Can you hear me? Alexander, can you hear me? He has been disconnected. Then we continue, not to lose any time, with Professor Dr. Semih Koray, Deputy Chairman of Vatan Party. Professor, Doctor, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much to United World International for having organized this interesting meeting and having invited me. Any evaluation concerning the elections in Turkey and its aftermath has to take into account two closely related but different axes. First and foremost, the elections were between Turkey and USA. The Table of Six was designed, tailored, directed, and closely monitored by an operations center by the US. The table had to get aligned with PKK, HDP, and Fethullah Terror Organization, which are sheer tools of America, because the table itself was formed as a sheer tool of America as well. The Atlantic system had declared openly and continued to do so until the elections that they aimed to overthrow Erdogan, whom they classified as a bad guy, along with Putin and Xi Jinping. The first attempt was done in July 2016, but the military coup attempt then was crashed by the Turkish people and military. They
Так, а
tried
куда
to
мне поставиться?
overthrow
Я на,
him.
вот там, сколько мы снимем, и сразу уеду.
А вон там Шкода стоит возле ворот.
Ага,
гаража,
хорошо.
Вот возле нее.
Спасибо.
Professor Koray, would you mind to make a stop here?
Okay,
Because
that's
Mr.
fine.
Sotnichenko
Let's give the
in a
floor to
hurry.
Alexander.
So we take you to the okay.
Okay.
Thank you for your understanding. Mr. Sotnichenko, you have the word. Go ahead. You're muted, Mr. Sotnichenko. You're muted. You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. No, first, I want to point on several details of the elections and its consequences for their Turkish foreign policy. The first, Turkey faced really unprecedented Western pressure on the electoral process. Really, I don't remember it before. I mean, publication of the Western political scientists in media, also numerous meetings between the Western politicians and Turkey's leaders of opposition. Also the meetings between foreign diplomats and the leaders of opposition, and so on. And so the situation looks like the second step of the relations between the West and Russia 10 years ago. Putin at that time was still a legitimate leader, but already authoritarian and non-democratic. So put Russian national interests above the universal liberal values. And the same I see Erdogan is on the same stage. So it looks like Erdogan becomes toxic to the West, and there are two possible ways that Turkey's foreign policy to fix it. The first way is to be more pro-Western. Now, after the victory, Erdogan may do some steps towards Washington, and there are plenty of possibilities to do so. For example, Turkey can arrange some sanctions against Russia, give more support to Ukraine, criticize Russia, Iran, or China, for example, and all these steps will be accepted by the West, and maybe America will help Turkey with money to fix this economical crisis. But at the same time, despite this, I hope Erdogan knows the history of the so-called authoritarian regimes. We remember the destiny of Milosevic, Gaddafi, Mubarak, and so on. So they were never forgiven, and in the result, they were imprisoned or killed. So I don't think Erdogan is really ready to do a pro-Western turn in his foreign policy. And Erdogan has shown it's during his victory speech in Istanbul. I think it's very important because he has already won, and it was not an electional speech. He affected the most sacred value of the nowadays Western civilization, the LGBT rights. So we should remember that demonization of Putin started also with his position on LGBT propaganda in Russia, and we remember how in London and in some other European capitals during gay parades, gay prides, they criticized Russia, criticized Putin as authoritarian leader, and so Erdogan does the same a mistake from the Western point of view. So he touched the main value of the Western civilization. And we should remember also that, as I see it, in near future, Turkey will continue the national interest-based policy. And we know its efficiency, and it's efficiently established on the balance between the relations with USA, European Union, Russia, Iran, and other actors. So 20 years of this foreign policy allowed Turkey foreign policy to be more independent. And the nowadays world crisis encourages the American political elite over and over again ask Turkey a question: are you with us or not? Are you the real allies of NATO or not? And once Ankara should answer this question, and especially now during the world crisis, political crisis, the crisis of the crisis of military, during the conflicts all over the world. Every day, Ankara will wait this question from the United States. Yes, we understand that Erdogan will want to continue his policy of balance, but sometimes he should choose his way. And during his, according to my point of view, during his election, his post-electional speech in Istanbul, he answered Europe answered Western world that he will be not with them. He will be with its own national interest. That's why I think that during the in the critical point, maybe he will answer this question not in Western way. Thank you for the attention, and sorry because really I'm in Istanbul and have many meetings today. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sotnichenko. Drive safely. You know the traffic in Istanbul is very dangerous.
Yes.
Thank you very much for taking the time. So,
thank you.
Without losing time, we move forward to Mr. Dimitris Konstantakopoulos, our neighbor to the west, from Greece. Dear Dimitris, you have the word. Please go ahead. How is your view on Turkey's foreign policy, place in the world, Turkish-Greek relations, or the relations of Turkey and Greece together in the world?
Yes, so as good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation to this discussion that I believe, I hope it will be very useful, as we come from different backgrounds and countries. And so we have a different probably a way of looking to things, taking into account different factors. The subject, as described by Yunus, would need to speak for days, not for 10 minutes. So I will try to make a useful reduction to what I think are some of its most important sides, and some sides which are usually not very much examined. For instance, most people who analyze Greek-Turkish relations, they look to them as the eternal antagonism of two nations since 1,000 years. There is some truth, of course, to that. There is a whole bunch of Greek-Turkish relations, both between Greece and Turkey and in Cyprus, and those are, even to name them, I would need 10 minutes at least. But there is also something more general superimposing, because there was not a military conflict during the last century at last between Greece and Turkey. There was not even a peace agreement between Greece and Turkey, which was decided in Athens or in Ankara for at least 1 century, and maybe more, but let us speak for this century. Greek and the decisions which affected the relations between Greece and Turkey were not taken in Athens or in Ankara. They were taken in London and in Washington. Lately, the role of Israel is becoming also more important. For instance, in 1921-22, Greece has made a great military campaign in Asia. Why? Because British wanted for Kemal not to take the Mosul oil. By the way, for historical reasons, I want to note here that in Easter, in the spring of 1922, there was a representative of Moscow, which is now the center, one of the centers of the multipolar world, who came to Greece with Karol Radek, one of the cadres of the Communist International, and proposed a kind of compromise between the fighting Greek and Kemalist forces. But of course, at that time, the Greek government did not want to hear or to have any contact with the Soviet Union. After the signing of the Lausanne Treaty, there was a relative calm until 1955. In 1955, we have the opposite scenario than what I described before. That is, Turkey is used by Washington, by NATO, by Israel, and by London in order, against Greece, in order to create problems to the Turkish Greek to the Greek Cypriot national liberation revolution in Cyprus. Why this? Because Cyprus, it's one of the most important strategic points in the world. Disraeli, when took it from the Ottoman Empire, he said it was the chain that we were missing, the chain from the West to the Middle East. Israel is interested for 2,000 years to Cyprus, and even the Zionist movement wanted to, the first idea was to create Israel in Cyprus. As for America, Henry Kissinger has said, those who control Gibraltar, Malta, Crete, and Cyprus reign over the world. So the independence of Cyprus or the union of Cyprus with Greece, both were completely unacceptable to the main centers of what it is a fashion now to call the collective West, United States, Britain, and Israel. And this is the basic explanation of what happened both in Greek-Turkish relations and in Cyprus itself between 1955 and I would say 2003. For example, most of us, I suppose, we know that Henry Kissinger was behind the coup d'etat of the American junta, of the American imposed junta in Greece. By the way, my idea is that the military dictatorship in Greece in 1967 was imposed not for any internal reasons, because at that time there was not any danger of a communist revolution in Greece. It was imposed because the forces of the collective West had to have such a puppet government in Greece, because this was the only way to overthrow the legitimate government of Makarios in Cyprus and destroy the Cypriot state, which was their fundamental role. In 1974, by the way, there is a very interesting testimony about that by Martin Packard. He wrote a book, Fragments from a Cyprus Diary, in 1964. Martin Packard was a British officer in Cyprus. And when George Ball, the vice minister of the United States, visited the island just after the intercommunal talks, Packard took him to see, because he was in contact with both the leaders of Greek and Turkish Cypriots, and he was able to make a good agreement just after the 1964 intercommunal clashes in Cyprus. George Ball saw the situation, and then he told to Packard, you have made a terrific job, but you got it wrong. Our work here is not to reconcile Greeks and Turks. It's to make them fight. And he describes this. 2 days later, Packard was taken from Cyprus. They muted him in an urgent way to Malta. And he's writing all this in his book. In 1974, it was Henry Kissinger who organized organized the Greek coup d'etat, the coup d'etat of the junta in Cyprus, with the aim of overthrowing and killing Makarios and destroying the Cypriot state. By the way, the scenario of this coup was exactly the same as in Santiago de Chile in September 1973, even in its details. And then she gave the green light to Bülent Ecevit to invade Cyprus. Of course, everything is not always going according to the plans. Makarios survived, the head of the socialists in Cyprus survived, and finally the Republic of Cyprus survived, even if it is exercising now its sovereignty in a part of the island. I make this reference to explain what is my position. Since 2003, and let me say approximately between 2003 and 2015, President Erdogan, we must acknowledge that he put into a kind of hypnosis, so to say, of he did not annul territorial claims in the Aegean Sea or some other things, but he tried to have a good neighborhood relationship with Greece. Things begin to change at around 2015. How they begin to change? On the one hand, we have a rise of Turkish nationalism in Turkey itself, and also we have a provocation by forces in the axis United States-Israel, exploiting the big dependence that the Greek state has acquired after 2010 in the quality of their political personnel. They push Greece into developing some kind of supposed alliances with Israel, Greece, Cyprus, Israel, and also to this project of an East Med pipeline. All of this was a bluff, in the sense that there was never, from the very beginning, any serious chance of constructing this pipeline. But the project itself was enough to provoke a very extreme Turkish reaction, and so to inflate the situation between the two countries. According to my information, even when the president of the Greek Republic went to Israel, visited Israel, Prokopis Pavlopoulos at that time in 2018, the Israelis acknowledged that this pipeline would never be constructed, but they were using it as a pressure to Turkey. Also in 2018, to give you only one example of this policy, the Greek media and state system was flooded with information that Turks were going to attack Castellorizo, they were making an invasion, etc. At that very time, the Turkish units which could do such an operation have moved to Afrin, to Syria, and they were fighting in Syria. It was also a pure provocation, but which created a large political echo, and we have arrived to the brink of war at the summer of 2020. Really, without any kind of real theme, because there was no question about. As for the alliance between Greece, Cyprus and Israel, all that meant was the further dependence of Greece upon Israel and the United States, nothing more. Neither Greece or Cyprus were not given any kind of military guarantees or agreement on On the contrary, they were clearly said, Israelis have clearly said that in case of a confrontation with Turkey, we will not defend you. So it was really a case of fiction, which was creating very serious political and military repercussions, which had as a result the extreme strengthening of the military dependence of Greece upon Israel and the United States. They have used it to put, I don't know, maybe 10 bases in Greece. And also to create very different mechanisms of geopolitical dependence, which have been added to the economic dependence we had after the bailout programs imposed to Greece on 2010, and the defeat of our effort via Syriza to overthrow this regime. One of the results was also that that has facilitated a huge arms competition between Greece and Turkey. You know, the two countries have such weapons that if they are used, they are going to destroy everything in both countries. There can be no victor at such a level of military technology. If they are not used, they will destroy the economy of Greece and Turkey. And this is why I believe it is of paramount importance to try to negotiate a ceiling on those enormous military expenditure of both countries, which will be destructive at the end for their own development. And they both need badly funds. We saw in the situation in the Turkish earthquakes, we see it in the dire situation of the Greek economy. They need those funds to be invested in other areas. Now, there is talk again about solving the problems between Greece and Turkey, etc., etc. I don't believe. I would of course be very glad if Greece and Turkey would be able to solve their problems, but I don't see any realistic hope of finding a just and equitable and accepted solution of those problems. For instance, no Greek would ever, or 80%, to be exact, or 95% if you want, they would not accept for the islands of Aegean not to have their defense forces, especially after 1974 and where they are. I give you just an example. I could also cite different examples from the Turkish side. The ideas of the two countries about what is just and not just, I'm not going into the details of the differences because this would take us much time. But the idea of the two countries, which is deeply entrenched into the national consciousness and the national ideology of both countries, makes, to my understanding, at least in the short period, in the historical horizon where I can see, impossible to solve them. Those differences about territorial waters, about the questions of militarization. What is the solution then? For me, the best solution is to freeze the differences, to accept the status quo in practice for a long period until there is maybe some possibility of solving those problems. Because trying to solve the problems by imposing solutions which are not accepted, it will get finally to a bigger crisis at the end. And, you know, sometimes, for instance, America is trying to mediate between Greece and Turkey. They have mediated, obviously, to have this kind of situation without this detente, which has dominated during the last period. And it is good that the detente is dominated. But we have to understand that always America is using the difference for various reasons. For example, when they discuss Turkish claims on the Greek islands of Aegean or their right of militarization, what they mean? They will never give the Aegean Sea to Turkey. They will never give it because of the strategic importance of the Aegean Sea as a continuation of the Straits. But what they want to use the Turkish claims in order to take those islands as much as possible for Greek sovereignty. And they have some months ago, for instance, the Greek Prime Minister has spoken of NATO islands. This is the goal. Their goal is not to take directly sovereignty over the Aegean, and they are using Turkish claims. Anyway, we have a long experience where American and British have intervened to solve problems. They have, for instance, in Yugoslavia, they have always created new problems. They signed the Dayton Agreement in order to make the Kosovo War some years later. They signed, they pushed to a Kosovo solution such that it is creating the possibility of a new crisis now. I remember when I have taken an interview 20 years ago from Richard Holbrooke. I asked him, okay, Richard, you say that you don't want Albanians cannot be under Serbian sovereignty after all that has happened. Okay, let me accept that. But the Serbs also of Mitrovica, why to put them under the sovereignty of the Albanians? He told me, no, they must remain in Kosovo and under Albanian sovereignty. Why? Because he wants always to have a problem. Because without a problem to solve, to mediate, to intervene, America has no any reason to be in the Balkans. The Balkans are, most of the Balkans are culturally connected to Russia. They were taking, at least until recently, their energy from Russia, and they wanted to go to Europe. This was the situation in 1990. If there were not those problems which they have created, Americans, nobody would need Americans in the Balkans. That is the way multipolarism is so to say, unipolarism, imperialism is acting from the time, not now, of Roman Empire and of its divide et impera. Our multipolar answer must be opposite, must be conciliation. Where the problems can be solved, they should be solved. Where they cannot be solved, it is better to let them where they are. Like, for example, we have seen two examples of such multipolar diplomacy, if I can use this term, in the relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia, or to the agreement for the reintegration of Syria into Arab League. Those are movements, and I think the equivalent between Greece and Turkey would be to make for a long time to make a kind of moratorium where both sides do not refuse their stated positions, but they don't try energetically to impose them. We can live with the status quo as we have lived 1 century after the Lausanne Treaty, and this is the best solution. Because even if a government here or there signs an agreement which is not it is not going to a stable solution, it will find some other. It will find this will, so to say, increase the disorder, the entropy of the whole region. We have the antagonism between Greeks and Turks, but we have also the effort of imperialism to weaken all states of the region and to transform them into tools of its own policy. And we must always keep in mind this, because otherwise we risk, for example, you see, and sometimes you win in a front, and if this win is so to say, it is not contributing to the general equilibrium, you will be punished in another. It is ancient Greeks were speaking of ivris and nemesis. For instance, the Americans made a coup d'etat in Maidan. They thought it was a good success. I don't know now if they still think that, but anyway, Russia has responded to them in Syria. And they were not waiting for this, and they were badly surprised by Russian intervention in Syria. So we must also take into account the general need of preserving equilibrium in the region, of preserving the stability of all the three states, Greece, Cyprus, and Turkey, and trying, of course, to find solutions where we can find solutions, but not to force solutions which we are not ready, for which we are not ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dimitris, for this presentation. Challenging history, challenging future. From Greece, now we move to the Syrian Arab Republic, the southern neighbor of Turkey. Another difficult relation, I would say. And here we have the guest, Professor Bessam Abu Abdullah. He's a political scientist from Damascus. Professor, can you hear me? Professor, can you hear me?
Yes.
Please, go ahead. Good afternoon, Professor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Because of my tight schedule, I couldn't really listen to my colleagues from Greece or others, but really sorry for that. So I will try during maybe, I don't know, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, how much time I have to conclude the main ideas which I want to talk about. First of all, to understand the foreign policy of Turkey after elections, we should a little bit analyze what is the main orientations in Turkish politics after the elections. What I could see that there is two important orientations, if we will talk about that. The first orientation, it's a Islamic conservatives with the national conservatives, which was led by the AK Party and the MHP, and some others, either from the left wing, but small group of political orientation. The second orientation was a secular one with left, with Islamic, with Kurdish. This is the main two orientation which we could see in the Turkish elections. The first orientation, which I mean the conservatives, national conservatives or Islamic, it's about 60 to 65% of the electoral votes in these presidential or in the parliament. And this is very important to understand where Turkey is going in foreign policy, because when we are speaking about 100 deputies in the parliament from the MHP and EE party, so we are speaking about a strong national orientation with Islamic orientation. The second point which I should mention that during this election, it was very clear that the Western camp, including United States, is supporting the opposition parties in Turkey. And I think it was reflecting the statement of Biden 4 years ago that we should topple President Erdogan by democratic way. And beside that, I think the Financial Times reflecting that when it wrote on the first page that the most important elections in Turkey 2023, and they put down Erdogan must go. It was clear, it was very clear that the West in general, EU and United States, they don't want to have a President Erdogan for another 5 years. And they could see that it's dangerous for them. So because of that, they were openly, frankly, supporting opposition, which was led by Mr. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. At the same time, we could notice that Russia, Iran, and China, maybe they supported with the Gulf states, they supported President Erdogan, and he recognized that. So the last elections in Turkey, it was not only internal elections, it was a confrontation between two main in foreign policy, two main orientations, two main in foreign policy. The first one, maybe I can call it more independent orientations for Turkey, to be not a part of the West, not a part of the East, but to be independent state for the future. Because many politicians, elites, they are talking that we are tired to be in the NATO more than 70 years, and now we should look for the interests of, for the national interests of Turkey. The opposite of that was the opposition. The opposition in Turkey, they talked openly about good relations with the United States, return to NATO, to the EU, and to the old policy of AK Party in 2002. They want to return now to that relations with the NATO. And they were not very positive toward Russia, Iran, and Russia, Iran, and China either. Yes, they supported the traditional relations, but one of the advisors of Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, he said one time during the elections campaign that we will remain Russia, that we are member of NATO. Now, depending on that analysis, what is the main orientations for the foreign policy of Turkey in general? If I will speak about the West, I think it will be normal relations, but it's not stable relations with the West, with NATO, and with the United States. So we will see not stable relations with NATO and with the West, because I think President Erdogan and his team, they know that the West was against them during these elections. But Turkey cannot leave the NATO, cannot leave the West because of the economic problems, because the banks in Turkey is a part of the Western financial system. So it's not easy for Turkey to leave the West, and it's not nobody asking Turkey to leave the relations with the West. But Turkey will continue its relations with the EU without any option about the membership of the EU, because I think there is decision that Turkey will not join EU absolutely, and the Turkish know that. The European talked about that openly. The second orientation is to develop relations with Russia, Iran, and China. I mean to go more to the east with the uprising powers in the world, and that Turkey should be part of this new world order. And I think depending on that, we will see more relations with Russia, Iran, and China, and neighboring countries. I will speak about Syria now, but mainly with the Arab states. The new foreign policy of Turkey in the next 5 years, they will go to the zero problems with the neighboring countries, but after the huge ranks which was committed during what we called it the Arab Spring, and during their investment in the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think this project is already collapsed in Syria, already collapsed in Tunisia, in Egypt, and nobody is supporting this orientation. And I think for Turkey is not beneficial already. Because of that, we could see and notice that they are speaking about national sentiment more than Islamic one. We will see that Turkey will return to its relations with the Gulf states, with Egypt, and I think President of Egypt, he talked to President Erdogan after his after the election directly. And now the main important thing, which the main question, all this very important, but without relations with Syria, it will be very difficult. Now with Syria, where we are now, this is very important. What happened that we had a quarterly committee in Moscow between Syria, Russia, Turkey, and Iran. We had two meetings between ministers of defense and the chief of intelligence agencies. And after this meeting, they talked about two important things. First of all, to create a professional committees to work on the ground and to create, and they created what they called operational committee, included there Syria, Turkey, Russia, I mean the military, Syria, Turkey, Russia, and Iran, to coordinate on the ground all operations. There is no information about what are the developments in this committee, but I think all sides want not to talk about that and not to publish anything in the media, because you know that it's a sensitive questions and it needs more secret work more than to talk in the media. Besides that, we could see the quarterly meeting between deputy ministers of foreign affairs in Moscow. Then after that, in the 10th of May, we could see that Mr. Magdad and Mr. Çavuşoğlu, they welcomed each other in Moscow and they took a picture. And after that, they created a committee for normalizing relations between Syria and Turkey. Now, but about this summit between two presidents, I cannot see now in the near future, because before leaving the Turkish army from Syrian territory, we cannot see any development in this site. Now, what is the main files on the table between Syria and Turkey? I can mention here three files. The first file is the file of refugees, which is the most important file for Turkey, because Turkey is talking about the 3,600,000 refugees from Syria, and there is and this file is very sensitive for the public opinion, and we could notice that during the elections campaigns, this file was the first file for the opposition and for the AK Party and its allies. But I think that when President Erdogan talked that they will start to build in the north houses for the refugees by support by financial support from Qatar, I think either this project will be not succeeded, and it will be going slowly, and it will be not solving the problem, because I think either the Turkish knows that how you will put it's similar to the safe zone, which they talked about that 1 year ago. I don't think that this is a solution, because how you will put the people who are not relevant to these territories, how will put them in that city. Anyway, I think I think that it was like a more propaganda to a little bit to make the public opinion in Turkey more quiet during the elections. Besides that, Mr. Çavuşoğlu talked that they're returning the refugees not only be in the north, but to the territories which under the control of the Syrian government. This is a more step forward. But this file is very complicated. We cannot solve this file by speeches or by statements or by articles. It needs to direct cooperation between two governments. It needs direct cooperation between two intelligence agencies. And it needs, more important, to finance the rebuilding the infrastructure, which was during the war destroyed in many places and many cities. So it needs more financial support to start this program. Now, where is the United States and the West in this fight? The United States and the EU, they are trying to stop returning of the refugees to Syria, and they are politicizing this file, and they want to leave these cards in the hands of United States until they will achieve or get a prize for this file. The exit from this situation, I think, may be the financial support from the Gulf states, with Turkey, with others, to start some programs to return these refugees. But to send refugees without any preparation in infrastructure, this is not acceptable. And I think refugees, they don't want to return now, or part of them. The second file is the file of withdrawing of the Syrian army from Syrian territory, which I think Damascus all the time, considering this is the first step for normalizing relations with Turkey, and with guarantees from Russia and Iran. And Damascus feeling that Ankara is trying to postponing this step, especially after the agreement between President Putin and Erdogan in 2019, when Erdogan promised to withdrawing from M4 highway, which until now is not realizing, and Damascus waiting for this step, which will be considered as a trust building a bridge between Damascus and Ankara. While Ankara at the same time considering that the presence of its army is for combating the PKK, YPG terrorism, and which is getting support from the United States, frankly and openly. And I understand that Damascus and Ankara is in this point is matching. There is a match of interest, but every country, Syria and Turkey, while Syria looking for combating terrorism in Idlib and against Al-Qaeda and other extremists, while Turkey looking that the danger of PKK or YPG is more important for its national security. Which is now, my speech is relevant to the third file, which is the file of combating terrorism. Here, there is an important mutual point between Syria and Turkey, that during the meeting between ministers of defense and the chief of or head of intelligence agencies, they talked that Syria and Turkey will combating all kinds of terrorist organizations, all kinds. So they didn't differ in that statement between PKK, YPG, or between al-Nusra or others group. But the priority for every country is different. Again, Turkey wants to fight against PKK, YPG, while Damascus seeing that combating Islamic extremists in Idlib. Because of that, I think that we can achieve something in this file, because this is the first step. So first step is to withdrawing from M4 as a trust building step. Now, where we are now there is a committee was established after the meeting between two ministers of foreign affairs in Moscow on 10 of May. This committee will include deputy ministers of foreign affairs and officials from ministries of defense and intelligence absolutely with the Russian and Iranian partners to prepare a roadmap for normalizing relations between Syria and Turkey. But Damascus is still saying that before normalizing any kind of relationship between Syria and Turkey, the Turkish military should withdrawing from Syrian territories. What now? What is the where is this process is going now after the elections? What we can see. It's my opinion, and many people saying that Turkey will not withdrawing, and Erdogan is. He is the fox. I'm speaking here in Syria, where they are talking some Syrian elites. And I understand them that because the bad experience between Syria and Turkey after 2010 make the ground is very difficult to discuss with the people about the Turkish foreign policy. Most of the public opinion and especially in the elite in general, they are not trusting the AK Party government, and they are saying that Erdogan and his government will continue its old policy. I am here reflecting the opinion of others, but my opinion, which is maybe many they are not with me, but I'm still writing about that and talking about that. And I think in Idle League, I wrote an article about Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, and I called him as a Turkish Zelensky. And at that time, it was published in many places. And really, I believe that the Turkish opposition, with my respect, they were connected directly to the United States, and I think it was not a good option. Now, if Erdogan is an option, I think it's a reality at the end of the day. This is not our option to elect not our option and not our choice in Turkey. The Turkish people, they elected their president, and we will deal with the Turkish state, not with the individuals. And I think that we are going to continue this process in spite of a statement from this side or other side. And there is a new factor in this process. It's a returning of Syria to the Arab League. It's the Syrian-Saudi relations, which it will be it's important factor for Syria in its negotiations with Turkey. And besides that, I think most of the Turkish elites and officials, they already changed their approaches towards Syria, including the collapsing of the political regime, including of collapsing of President Assad, or etc. We know the last 10 years what they called. Now we are in front of a new position. The atmosphere is changing in the region. All sides needs each other. After the Saudi Iranian rapprochement is very important to take into that, taking that into consideration for Turkey. And I think we will see more negotiations between Syria and Turkey. It's a difficult and not easy negotiations and not easy process, but I think my opinion that this process will continue. I mean, through the quarterly meeting in Moscow or in other places. Why? Because Turkey now is in a difficult economic situation in general. There is a consequences of the earthquake in the 6th of February 6th, the last earthquake. There is a difficult situation in general inside Turkey, And it needs another approaches towards Syria. Syria, it's the main gate for Turkey toward the Gulf states, and there is no other gate. It's a dictatorship of geography. This is first. Secondly, I think after 10 years, the Turkish foreign policy showed that it was failed towards Syria. So I think the Turkey should withdrawing its army step by step from Syria, because the cost of presence of this army is about 1 billion, $0.5 billion, $1.5 billion. This is a huge money for Turkey, but absolutely the withdrawing, we are speaking about step by step in coordination with the Syrian government, with the Russian, with the Iranian, because to fill this gap it should be very well coordinated. So we are, I can see that we are going step by step. At the end of the day, there is no way except sitting around the table and talking to each other and taking into consideration that there is now a new world order, there is a new atmosphere in the region, there is a new orientations in foreign policy of Saudi Arabia, Iran, and I think Turkey should taking that into consideration, because for its interests and for not only for economic, for the future, because Turkey is a part of this region, and the old policy of Turkey should be finished, and we should close this file and open a new page as the relations between Syria and Saudi Arabia. But the main gate, the main window for that, it's that Turkey should be starting to withdrawing from the Syrian territory, to stopping supporting this group, al-Nusra and others, a terrorist group. And I think it will be, because this is not beneficial for Turkey in a way. The third thing is to start to talk about refugees and not interfering in the internal affairs of Syria. This is the important point because some political figures in Turkey thinking that they can decide the future of Syria. The future of Turkey already decided the Turkish people. The future of Syria already or will be decided by the Syrian people. So as the Turkish, they are sensitive towards interfering in the internal affairs, I think the Syrian in the same position. So they should help not interfere in the internal affairs of Syria. Now we are in front of President Assad and President Erdogan for more than 5 years. So we should all help to solve the problems between two states, because we should know that there are many sides in two states and in the region, especially the United States. They don't want to see any kind of rapprochement between Syria and Turkey. If the Syria and Turkey will have rapprochement between them, reconciliation, and I think the Kurdish project, especially in the northeast of Syria, will be weaker and weaker. While when the confrontation between Syria and Turkey, the Kurdish, in parentheses, the Kurdish, it will be expanding on the cost or the cost of Syria and Turkey. So this is one of the options which is pushing or imposing Syria and Turkey to go for reconciliation. In general, I can see that the foreign policy of Turkey, especially towards the Arab states and especially towards Syria now, we are speaking about Syria, I think it will be changed step by step, and it will be leave all the cards and going directly to the Syrian government to organize this complicated fight. The Muslim Brotherhood foreign policy is not working in the future. Muslim Brotherhood, nobody wants them in the Arab region, and it's not beneficial, not for Erdogan, not for their party, because, and I know that there is a Muslim Brotherhood orientations inside the AK party, but now it's not strong as it was before. And I think President Erdogan, after he will create his new cabinet, he would take a lot of these sites into consideration and looking for better relations with, starting from Syria. Syria is a key for the region. Without this key, either the relations with other states is difficult to be beneficial for Turkey. I think it's enough for me. My idea, this is the main idea. Thank you very much, my friend, and I hope that we will see each other in Turkey in the future. I worked 4 years in Turkey, but I lost more than 20 years, and the last 10 years with our friend in Vatan Party and other friends in Turkey, we had a struggle together to return this relation. This is our history. This is our future of generation. There is no way we are at the end of the day neighbors and brothers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah, Professor Dr. Abdullah, for your presentation. For United World International, you are always very welcome. We publish with great pleasure your articles as well as the articles from other contributors. And I hope also that relations between the two countries and states will get better soon. And with that, I give the floor to Professor Dr. Semih Koray, who is the Deputy Chairman of the Vatan Party, which, as you mentioned, has played quite an important role also in Turkish-Syrian relations. So, as a Deputy Chairman of the Vatan Party, Professor Dr. Semih Koray has until now the last word. Please go ahead, Professor.
Okay, thank you very much again for giving the floor to me. Well, I had started to talk about the following. I will summarize what I said. In order to talk about Turkey's foreign policy after the elections, we first have to understand the nature of the elections and what lessons we should draw from the elections. So I thank very much to Professor Abu Abdullah because he made my job very easy in that regard. Now, there are two different axes which are closely related but different, along which this evaluation should be done. The first one is the elections in Turkey. They were not ordinary domestic elections. The elections were between Turkey and the United States. The United States authorities had declared that they wished to overthrow Erdogan. The support they gave to the opposition to the Table of Six is not just an innocent support from outside. It should be understood that the Table of Six was designed, tailored, directed, monitored by the United States directly. So that's important to understand what the importance that the United States attaches to who will come to power in Turkey. That's something extraordinary. It's also important to note that the United States had no dream of establishing a relatively stable pro-American power government here. They know that that's impossible. But what they aimed at was, through the Table of Six, to deactivate the state apparatus, make the way free to PKK, to terror organizations, to Fethullah Gülen organization, to loan sharks in the West. Well, what their plan about Turkey via the Table of Six was chaos. not establishing a regime which would work relatively stably to the interests of the United States. I think that's important to understand as well. Fortunately, their plan failed. That is not only fortunate for Turkey, but that is fortunate for the entire world. But that's only a part of the story. It's not the whole story. Now, Turkey is a country where the anti-American sentiment is very high. According to polls, it varies between 80 and 90%. A majority of the Turkish people, according to similar polls, a majority of Turkish people, they regard Russia and China as friendly countries, as countries with whom cooperation of Turkey should be developed. Well, in such a situation, it is not possible not to lose its hegemony over Turkey entirely just via a bridgehead. Now, you need extra measures in order to keep Turkey confined in all planes, the military plane via NATO, in the cultural plane via ideological tools, economically via making Turkey subject to the Western global economic market, and the main tool there is via loan sharks. So if this can be done, the main content of what the United States aims in doing this, in confining Turkey to the Atlantic system, it is to restrict the resistance of the Turkish national forces to the tactical region and prevent it from being risen to the strategic level. I think that's important, and that's what the United States will continue to do by threatening Turkey, by frightening the government, using various measures and so on. Next. All of Turkey's problems regarding national security, regarding economy, regarding the cultural problems, the source of all those threats and drawbacks is the Atlantic system itself. So there is no even partial solution to any of these problems within the Atlantic system. The only way for Turkey to solve its problems, that are very heavy problems, especially economically, under the present circumstances, Turkey, of course, should try to solve these problems based on its own power, based on its own potential, but Turkey needs close and much further cooperation with China, Russia, its neighboring countries, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Azerbaijan, and other Eurasian countries in order to strengthen its own power and in order to turn its own potential into material force. Now, in the Atlantic system, that cannot be done. Such an international relation, that's against the nature of the relations of a country with the Atlantic system. But that can be done in the other part of the world, in the developing world, in Eurasia. that can be done, and Turkey actually needs to do that in order to get over, to cope up with the difficulties it is facing. And so that means it has to get out of NATO, step out of the Atlantic system. Now, that will not only be important for foreign relations of Turkey, but also, as I will try now to elaborate, for its domestic national union as well. Now, another lesson that we have to draw from the Turkish elections is that the Turkish people still seek solutions with the present system. So that's important to specify, but also the very fact that the Turkish people attached the great importance the Turkish people attached, in spite of the very heavy difficulties in the economic field, to the independence and to the sovereignty of Turkey. That shows they may still seek solutions within the system, but that shows that they are very open to outside the system solutions. So in the coming years, in the near future, it is very important, it will be very important to turn this potential, this objective stand of circumstances into a real national power. And they are ready to actually reach outside the system solutions by not respecting what the Atlantic system imposes upon Turkey. Another aspect of the elections, another lesson that we have to draw from the elections is the extent that the polarization within the Turkish people has reached. Turkey cannot cope up with its difficulties, cannot solve the problems it faces in case it cannot actually lessen this tension. That's a prerequisite for Turkey's solving its problems and getting over its difficulties. Now, for this, the following thing is very important. The popular sport shown to the table of 6 does not mean that a considerable majority of people are not against imperialist hegemony. A partial rationale behind that sport is that whether they like it or not, irrespective of that, it's the illusionary belief that the future will be shaped by the West. Thus, Turkey is strengthening its relations with the Eurasian part of with the developing world and solving its problems. That will not only to getting out of NATO, to stepping out of the Atlantic system, that will not only induce trust on the part of the partners, Eurasian partners of Turkey. That will be a big gain. That will give a big impetus to Turkey's relations with that part of the world. But that is also the only and the most important antidote against the illusion which is actually dominating a considerable portion of the Turkish people. We have to get over this, and it will be also our foreign policy, the foreign policy that Turkey will be follow, that will provide a very important tool to get over with this illusion and to restore the national union of Turkey once more. Now, the Turkish elections really marked a historical point, a turning point. But I think the aftermath of the elections is to be even more historical. Now, Erdogan governments, AK Party governments, foreign policy will be tested in very crucial regional problems, which also have a global impact. Now, I will not try to forecast what AK Party government will do in terms of foreign policy, because either way of forecast is not useful. It harms. If you think that it cannot do this, well, then that's not useful for anyone. You should try to make him do it. If you say it will do it and delegate that, that's not useful either. So I will be content with actually listing some of the examples to exemplify what issues will test AK Party, and we as Vatan Party will try to do our best. We will support if things are done in the appropriate way, but will oppose and try to change the balance policy, which actually restricts all the issues to the tactical plane, to raise it from the tactical plane to the strategic plane. And all the issues, which I'll list here to exemplify what awaits Turkey, they all are the common property of them is, well, whether you stay at the tactical level or if you have a holistic strategic view. Well, disabling the separatist and fanatic terror organizations in northern Syria via military cooperation between Syria, Turkey, Russia, and Iran within the framework of the territorial integrity of Syria. That's not a regional issue, just a regional issue. If you can solve it via this, well, that will have a very big impact upon the whole world. Another issue is resisting the expansion of NATO towards the east in a determined way and putting the military bases of US and NATO under the control of Turkish armed forces as a preparatory step towards getting out of NATO. Well, if you do not do this, you cannot also fight the military bases in Iraq, in Syria, in Greece, and so on. So designing and implementing effective policies to put an end to all US military bases in the region, in Greece, Syria, and Iraq, along with Turkey, or adopting a determined stance against all sanctions imposed by the US, playing an active role in enhancing China's One Belt, One Road initiative with the aim to turn Turkey into a production basis, taking measure against the reign of US dollar on the world finance and trade, working towards the inclusion of countries as Russia, China, and Iran into the organization of the Turkish states with the aim to turn Turkish population living in those countries to a cement of for Eurasian into a cement of Eurasian unification, enhancing cooperation with Russia for strengthening the Eurasian unity by normalizing the relations with European countries and preventing Europe from becoming a reserve power of the US. If, for example, Turkey and Libya, Turkey and Russia cooperate in Libya to restore the integrity of Libya, that will not be a domestic issue. That will have a very big impact. We have to show, we have to prove to the whole humanity that problems created by the Atlantic system can only be solved by the developing world by cooperation within Eurasia. Okay. Now, the main aim, the content of threats and frightenings on the part of the US in the coming period will actually try to restrict Turkey's government to the tactical plane, to taking issues one by one, to take this stance in this issue, another stance in the other issue, to keep away Turkey, to prevent Turkey adopting a strategic and holistic approach. Now, last but not least, it's also crucial to relate all this to the strategic aim of the US. The rise of a new system from Asia that can compete with the Atlantic system in all fields of life makes the imperialist system face a matter of life and death. If an alternative civilization, an alternative system, if that does not develop, a social system will never leave the stage of history without an alternative to that being created. But now the imperialist system really faces a big, whether it will come to an end or not. Well, no matter how bad it is, how rotten it is, well, so long as there is no alternative to take over the future, to shape the future of humanity, well, they will not go away. So this means the following thing, it has to be also taken into account that this situation increasing the risk-taking coefficient in the strategic behavior of America. Doubtless, there is no doubt, no power will launch a world war if it does not believe that it can win it. The strategic aim of the US is, however, to restore its position by changing the balances of the world in such a way that will enable it to win a global war against the developing world in case it launches. The US cannot win such a war if the Eurasian unity is strengthened and USA fails in turning Europe into a reserve power of its own. It is thus very well possible to deter the United States from launching such a war under the present circumstances. But it is important to note the strategy on the part of Turkey and on the Eurasian countries should take into account that every gain on the part of the US takes the risk of such a war closer, while every loss of USA reduces this risk. This aspect should be taken into account not only in Turkey's foreign policy, but in the foreign policies of all the Eurasian countries. Thus, the failure of America's plans in the Turkish elections is good news for the entire world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Semih Koray, for the extensive presentation with a radical stance also, with your proposals of exiting the Atlantic system, of exiting the getting out of NATO. I think these topics will be on the Turkish public debate in the coming times, even more than they have already been in the past. So now we would proceed to the part where the attending journalists and my colleagues from United World International can ask questions to the participants. You can apply to the chat function here on the right side. So here comes on the here comes a question from my colleague Mehmet Perinçek. The question is direct to Professor Cem Karadeli. The question is, you said, Professor, that Ibrahim Kalın is the most important candidate for the foreign ministry and that this could lead to changes in Turkish foreign policy. In which direction would these changes take place? Can you explain this with examples? Professor Karadeli, do you hear me? You are muted.
Yes, okay. Now, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
First of all, yes, there is a discussion within the foreign minister circles in Ankara that either it will be a continuation with the present foreign minister Çavuşoğlu or Ibrahim Kalın will have that post. Well, the general approach of everyone who had become foreign secretary or foreign politics advisor to the president up to now has influenced Turkish foreign policy up to an extent. Obviously, we cannot say it will change it radically, but with such a replacement, I believe Turkey will have more proactive relations with Eurasian countries, will have some relationships with, as I mentioned, India, China, Russian Federation to establish a closer rapport with these countries. But also, I do believe Mr. Kalın, if he becomes foreign minister, may have influence in solving some problems as starting talks with Syria and other issues that were discussed here. I think he's a very clever person and with a very good education. So I believe he will be bringing some new ideas on the table, but I cannot obviously, because I haven't talked to him or don't know him that well in person, I cannot speculate what other changes can come.
Okay, thank you very much. And here comes another question from my colleague Onur Sinan Güzaltan. The question is directed to Professor Bassam Abu Abdullah. Professor, can you hear me? The question is, how does Saudi Arabia view the normalization between Turkey and Syria? And what lies behind Qatar's opposition to this normalization? Professor? Professor Bessam Abdullah, you are muted. You are muted.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay. 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 For relations between Syria and Turkey, I think the Arab states going forward in their normalization of relations with Turkey, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and others and other Arab states. So their position will be positive for that, and maybe I think they will help because the most of the Arab states now looking for stability in the region. And because of that, we could see that Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates supported the campaign of President Erdogan, and he recognized that. Qatar, I think it's relevant to the Turkish position. When the Turkey will be start to change its position and going forward in its in normalizing relations with Syria, I think the Qatar position will be changed step by step. The other thing that Qatar, considering that it's the last camp for the Muslim Brotherhood, main of the leaders still in Qatar, and Qatar is close to the United States. We should take into consideration that Qatar is a member of NATO outside of the NATO. And it's a ally of NATO from outside. Because of that, so its role is not very important. The most important role now is for Saudi Arabia with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. I think this is the most important, and Syria is concentrating on its relations with Saudi Arabia. So I think the situation is in interest of all parties in the region, Iran, Turkey, the Arab states. Otherwise, I think they tested for more than 10 years wars, Saudi Arabia in Yemen, Turkey was in Syria. Now, a lot of problems after this war. I think the others participated in this difficult situation and nothing, absolutely. No development, no opportunity of jobs for young people, no development in the economy. So they all sides lose in the last decade in the region. So we should change our approaches absolutely. Our approaches in Turkey, in Iran, in the Arab states, and we should change everything. We should have another approaches. Maybe for our colleague who said that Mr. Ibrahim Kalin, who will be Minister of Foreign Affairs, I think it's important, the figures, but at the end of the day, I think the deep state in Turkey, I mean, military security agencies, the most important elites, they reconsidering or restudied their approach towards Syria 2 years ago, and they came to conclusions that all policies should be changed. So I think the things will go maybe with difficulty, but the process is already going, especially with the support of Russia now, Iran, and I think maybe Saudi Arabia will be joining these efforts. Now we are speaking about a new region, and we are not speaking about confrontation. We are speaking about a new region. We are speaking about 2030 in Saudi Arabia. We are speaking about Turkish century in Turkish now. How President Erdogan talked about that. So all sides needs to change their minds towards and to take lessons from the last decade. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have here our last guest, Dr. Eli Hatem, has just joined us. Dr. Hatem, can you hear me? He is connecting from France. Connecting to audio.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Dr. Hatem?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Great. So we were about to finish, but we would very much like to listen to your presentation as well. You have 10 minutes. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. Sorry for being a little bit, because I am at the court in Paris. I had a case, murder case, a criminal case. So the idea is that the thing is that the word is changing today. And the main idea of my topic is this new multipolar word that we are assisting to. We all remember that the word have changed, and at the end of the Second World War with the bipolarization. Are you listening to me, or it's something that has been cut? Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Is it fine? Yes. So I repeat. So I was saying that after the Second World War, we all assisted to the transformation of the word during the bipolarization. I mean, with the Eastern and the Western bloc. And we all remember that the word was divided into a free word on a side, and on the other side, we had this word under what we used to call it totalitarianism. And we all were, personally, I was against totalitarianism and was like a big fighter defending the values of the free word and of the respect of international law. And we all was very happy, and even myself, when the ex-Soviet Union was fallen and fall. And we were all waiting for a new word of the respect of international law, a word of peace, and a word of security, and a word of, I would say, also the equality between states, and respecting the sovereignty, respecting the specificity of states, and respecting civilizations. But little by little, we were totally deceived, and myself also, I was so surprised to see the word changing and becoming the whole word under a sword of totalitarianism and a lack of freedom. I will give you one example that we are feeling in the Western countries, including in France and England and the other countries, that we are like watched all the time. We cannot talk freely. Our mobile phones are always closed when we have a meeting. All our transactions are very much regarded and examined by compliance, by bankers. All our also movements inside the EU are very particularly also very much examined and watched by the authorities. And this is from personal point of view. And on the other side, on the international scene, in international relations, we assisted to a lot of violations of international public law. And we all remember that at the end of the Dayton Conference that ended the war in ex-Yugoslavia, a new power has been erected as a kind of the police of the world, which is the United States of America, imposing a kind of a diktat on the world with the distribution of sanctions, with the military intervention when the United States say that it is suitable to make a military operation. We all remember what happened all over the world, especially in the Middle East, in South America, and so many parts of the planet. And the United States recognized by themselves that are becoming the sole, I would say, power imposing their hegemony and diktat on the world, including the United Nations. And I can give you my testimony, as I was the advisor of late Boutros Boutros Ghali, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, and he was feeling that the United Nations became under the hegemony of the United States of America, because we all know that Washington is not far from New York, and the headquarters of the United Nations is in New York. And I remember this famous sentence pronounced by Boutros Ghali in one of his speeches, when he said that the Americans wanted from me a secretary, and I have been elected myself as a general by imposing his will and trying to impose the respect on international public law. This is why, by the way, he was not re-elected as a new or for a new mandate on the top of the United Nations. This is how the situation remained on the international scene, and we were feeling that we are, in a word, with a dictatorship without an apparent dictator. Things changed very soon, very quickly, I would say, since the regrettable war in Ukraine. Personally, as so many people like me, we are against the violence, against the war. But the only positive thing that what happened in Ukraine opened new perspectives to the war, and we are feeling that there is a change. I mean, the world is not going to be any more unipolar like before under the domination of the United States of America. And we are assisting to the growth of new powers like, of course, Russia, because it's involved in this war, of course, and China, Iran, Turkey, and so many other countries like India and Pakistan and whatsoever. And even recently, President of France, Emmanuel Macron, when he visited China and his way back to Paris, he made a declaration saying that we need not to be anymore under the hegemony of the United States of America. Even though if we are part of NATO, we need to be to have a kind of a sovereignty, that means in political term, which is the independence from the United States of America. Of course, he has been very much criticized by so many countries of the European Union, because many of the states members of the European Union are under the hegemony and the pressure, of Washington and the United States of America. What we are assisting to today, and this is my message, it is a change all over the world, the change of the history of the world, with the end of the unipolar world, and I would say the birth and the creation of new institutions like the Bank of Development, which is located in Shanghai, that it's going to maybe to replace the World Bank and the FMI, the IMF, I mean the International Monetary Fund, that are both of them under the domination of the United States. And we are, I think that today we are the majority of the states of the planet, because we have the African continent, we have the Southern American continent, we have most of the Asian countries, including China, India, Pakistan, Iran, the Middle East, even also so many European countries, including some states of the European Union, like Hungary, like Greece. Even France is starting to trying to go out and to be free from this American hegemony. We all remember also the declaration of the French president when he said that NATO is in a kind of a coma, and when he was like threatening the United States to leave NATO during the diplomatic struggle between France and the United States due to the conflict with Australia, when Australia tried to terminate the contract signed with France. So what we hope that maybe the United Nations should either disappear and we create a new organization like what happened with the League of Nations, or we can transform the United Nations as it is in a way to give to all the state members of this worldwide organization more power in order to be more democratic and to be the organ of monitoring international law and trying to push the states to respect it, and not only one power to distribute sanctions. And we are waiting now for new, I would say, institutions and organizations similar to the one who were under the American domination, like BRICS and other, with the development of new commercial exchanges. And maybe with this new word, we can make sure that all the countries will respect international public law, and we can arrive into a balanced word, I would say, and not a word under the domination of one power, which is the United States of America. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hatem, for your perspective on the global issue, on the global side. I think we have a question for you from Mr. Shafak Erdem.
Sure. Welcome.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Can you hear me?
Of course, very well.
You mentioned that President Macron is pursuing a policy relatively independent from the United States. As well as it is concerned Türkiye, many commentators, many analysts in Türkiye think that Macron was pursuing a policy with the US against Turkey in the Mediterranean. Do you think that Macron was in a cooperation or still in a cooperation with the United States in Mediterranean against Turkey or not?
What we have to know is that there is a kind of a conflict between two words, the Francophone word, which is a French-speaking, word, what we call it, or the Catholic word, and the Anglo-Saxon word. And before the growth of the United States after the Second World War, England was on the head of this Anglo-Saxon word. Today, who is leading this word is the United States of America. Unfortunately, France was under the domination of the United States, especially after the Second World War, but General de Gaulle tried and succeeded in leaving NATO, and especially I would say the military side of NATO. But when President Nicolas Sarkozy came to power, he was backed by the Americans, and that's how he became, he succeeded to be elected president of France. And this is what it has been said in France. During the mandate of Nicolas Sarkozy and the mandate of François Hollande, France became fully under the, I would say, the supervision, if not to say the domination of the United States of America. But of course, there was a kind of still a rivalry of the two cultures, of the two interests. When President Macron arrived to power, he tried to bring back the, I would say, the traditional policy of France with giving his country a presence on the international scene. And of course, the United States of America was not happy to see France becoming again a power, especially that it does not belong to this Anglo-Saxon word. That's why the United States tried to fight and is still fighting French interest in Africa. And I'll give you an example. When we say that no, in Africa it is Russia that is fighting the French interest in Africa. This is totally wrong, and I will demonstrate to you why. Because who is today involved in some African countries? It is Wagner, and it is not the Russian government. And when I used to say that there was a kind of infiltration of Wagner, which is composed by mercenaries, and those people who were being infiltrated inside Wagner were infiltrated by, I would say, by a way or another from the American intelligence services and the CIA. Few people were believing me until we discovered that there is a real conflict between Wagner and the Russian army, between Wagner and the Russian government. What happened, and this kind, I would say, of misunderstanding between France and Turkey, the force behind was the United States of America to create a tension between France and Turkey. And there is a proverb that says divide et imperare, means divide to better govern. This is the policy of the United States of America, to make fight inside the NATO between two members that belong, both of them, to NATO. You know, we have some people, some, I would say, observers in France that say that Turkey is not totally cut from the American, I would say, interest and American, I would say, supervision. And one of the examples it is that the United States was distributing, not giving, distributing sanctions to many countries, to anyone who is not, I would say, respecting or threatening the international law. If really the United States was really fighting Turkey, it would have given, I would say, one sanctions against Turkey. So the United States is playing, whenever someone is becoming, I would say, powerful, it plays all the game to awaken him, to awaken him. This is what's happening, you know, in this struggle in Ukraine, because in Ukraine, I will tell you what's happening. It's a war between the United States of America against Europe and against Russia on the Ukrainian territory. And this is how the United States are playing. When they say that Ukraine is becoming strong, they won't give any more weapons to the Ukrainians in order to awaken the Ukrainian and to make a kind of balance to keep the war inside of Ukraine. And this is what happened between France and Turkey. And I think President Erdogan and President Macron understood it, but it was a little bit too late.
Thank you very much for your answer. I think that's very interesting. I'm looking forward to have another chance to deepen this evaluation. Professor Dr. Semih Koray, you had the last word. I think there is no more questions. Would you like to add something, Professor?
I'm very pleased to participate to your seminar. And this is really, I'm so happy. And I would like to congratulate you for the re-election of President Erdogan. I will tell you why. Because we are, as I said, today, we are a new free world. We are emerging. We are a world that we are defending our history. We are defending our civilization. We are defending our culture. And we all are against globalization. We are all against those powers who are trying to destroy our societies, our families. And this is how I think we are winning against the globalization system, against this unipolar world. And we are opening the world to more equal states, to more equal nations for a better life of each of us in this multi, I would say, national world in the term of multinations composing the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Semih Koray, would you add something on it?
the problems that we face are all complicated problems. A new world is rising from Eurasia. True, that's very nice. But in order to continue its development, in order to complete the construction and alternative system to the imperialist system, now we have to solve many complicated problems which require innovation and novelty in approaches. So meetings like this, they are very useful from different angles, how the same problem is seen from different angles. This teaches us to understand each other and to use that information. Well, in fact, it's not a duty of United World International, but if we could form closer working groups on well-chosen problems, come closer and work in detail on these problems, well, I guess that would be very useful, and the value added by that in solving the domestic and international problems, that would be very large, very great. So that's what I wish to. We have tough problems. The problems are not easy. Just saying, well, the general approach, they have to be worked out in detail. So that's why, and especially from the viewpoint of Turkey, we need closer relations with European countries. Because I think the crucial point is to prevent, to put an obstacle to Europe becoming a reserve force of the United States. That will change the fate of humanity entirely and in a radical way. So Eurasia, Europe should become part of Asia, and we also should benefit from their background accumulation, from how they see from their angles. So that's, and such panels are very useful in that regard. Thank you once more to United World International for having organized this and having brought us together on the screen.
Thank you very much, Professor. But there came a last-minute question from Ms. Odile Mojon. I would direct it to Professor Dr. Cem Karadeli. Mademoiselle Mojon asks, it is expected that this will be the occasion to push further the project of global NATO, already discussed during NATO summit in Madrid, to give even more power to the Atlantic Pact. Do you think it might impact in any way Turkish policy?
Thank you. It's a very good question, but I mean, even if not in terms of membership, in terms of application, we still have a global NATO, because NATO is involved in Afghanistan, or was involved in Afghanistan. It's involved in the Taiwan issue. It's involved in different manners in different parts of the world. So we cannot actually expect things to change extremely much in the near future from this overextension of NATO's interests. But as far as Turkey is concerned, I think the problem is we cannot live without NATO and we cannot live with NATO. And we have to make finally a real choice in the matter, because NATO, on the one hand, hampers Turkey's objectives in the world, in the region, and on the other hand, provides us some sort of, well, at least imaginary protection. So I believe if we find new allies around the world in the Eurasian perspective, like India or Russian Federation, or better ties with China, then we can just look at NATO as something of the past and go through these changes. But on the other hand, if that wouldn't happen, obviously Turkey will have to decide on its idea of protection from outside influence. And obviously there is this fifth article of North Atlantic Treaty that everyone's talking about, that NATO will come to the aid of everyone who's targeted by a foreign power. But as Turkey, we very well know from the Johnson letter of 1960s that might not be the case. So I think global NATO might complicate things between English-speaking nations and the rest of the world, and I believe Turkey should work on this with the likes of France and other major European Union countries on the one hand, and with the likes of India and other Eurasian powers on the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Dr. Hatem, you wanted to add something on it?
I wanted just to add something when we were talking about the more specific regional organization. That reminds me the ideas of late Boutros Ghali, because he was feeling that the 21st century is going to be composed by new NGOs replacing the United Nations and replacing even the states. And I'm totally with this idea of helping for creation of NGOs on very specific subjects and interests, common interests of states.
Thank you very much. And I think now we have concluded a 2.5-hour webinar on Turkey's foreign policy after the election. I understand these have been historic elections for Turkey and the world. There I see a consensus. I see a second consensus from Syria over Russia to over Greece to France, that the United States is trying to produce conflict in our region, produce conflicts between Turkey and its neighbors, close neighbors or further away neighbors such as France. I understand that the majority, that all the speakers agreed that the answer to this is a kind of multipolar approach, which seeks reconciliation, or, as our colleague from Greece said, at least freezing conflicts until they are solved in a later time. I would very much like to thank you on behalf of United World International for your participation. Professor Dr. Cem Karadeli from ANKASAM, Chief Advisor to ANKASAM, Professor Dr. Semih Koray, Vatan Party Deputy Chairman, dear friend Dimitris Konstantakopoulos from Greece, geopolitics expert, Professor Dr. Bessam Abu Abdullah, another dear friend from Syria, the political scientist. Mr. Alexander Sotnichenko had to leave. He had a very tight schedule. And Dr. Eli Hatem, thank you for taking your time between murder cases to help us solve the bigger global crisis, the global bigger mystery. Thank you all. Also to my colleagues who have presented here the questions, and to all members of press who have attended. And hereby I do close the webinar, and thank you again for taking part, and looking forward to continue communication and exchange with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're waiting for you to close the screen, Mr. Soner. Ah. I
Okay.